Hello, everybody. My name's Kelley Franke. I'm just waiting on Lauren Rosen. We are going to be continuing our conversation today about mental compulsions. So, this is Mental Compulsions Part 2, and she shall be here any moment.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good because my sound's working.
Hell yeah, it is. Is my sound working?
Yeah, it's
Genius.
it's really working well.
You're working well today, my friend.
We both are
Thanks.
the best we
Great.
can.
Greetings, all. Salutations. Welcome to Purely OCD.
Yes, I'm Kelley Franke, and this is Lauren Rosen. And
And
we're here to talk about mental compulsions part 2.
we sure are. And I've got our list up and ready to go. Um,
Yes.
so shall we dive right in? Any thoughts before we get underway?
No, let's get in. Let's get dirty. Let's do
Let's
it.
get down and dirty. And if you have any questions, throw them in the question mark situation area. Um, well, so the
Situation area.
that situ the you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, we did talk about rumination last time, if I remember correctly, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah. So we got a little
Uh-huh.
bit into our second list because I got to talk about cows chewing their food and then
Yep.
re-chewing their food. Um, so the next on our agenda is mental rehearsal.
Yes. So you want me to take that or?
Do it.
Okay, let's do it.
Beast
So
mode.
mental rehearsal, folks, is when it's exactly how it sounds. So it's when we're rehearsing these events and going over ways that it could go and all the different scenarios in which it can go. Like, what if today, when I see my daughter, I pick her up this way? How will I be? And how will she respond? So it's more of this future rehearsing of events that haven't, and all the different variations, like choose your own adventure.
Hmm. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Trying to anyway. But
Trying.
like choose your own adventure books, oftentimes with mental rehearsal, pick one, right? I don't know if
Yes.
for those of us who have read choose your own adventure books as children, you pick one, you go, and then that version of the story ends, and
Hmm.
then you come back and then you choose another route and another route and another route, right? Like the mental rehearsal piece is going to keep you can go in so many different directions with it,
Well
really.
said. And honestly, I'm not going to lie, those books I used to go through because I wanted to know every single.
That's it. That's what
So
I
I
mean.
like it never worked out for me because I was never satiated. I wanted to keep going with it and see all the different directions. So yeah,
Exactly. Because, yeah, you need to figure out how it could all go. And this is all with the same aim,
yeah,
right? To
yeah.
get some degree of certainty, to quell the anxiety, the underlying uneasiness.
Hmm.
What themes do you see this popping up with most?
Well, we definitely see it a lot in social anxiety,
Totally.
which, that's not straight up OCD, but all the ways that you're going to engage in a certain situation. Um,
Yeah. I mean, and they're cousins, basically. Social
yeah,
anxiety,
they are cousins. Yeah, they're
basically.
cousins. Um,
Um,
yeah,
I think one of the ways it can come up is in the moral scrupulosity way. Am I going to
it's true.
act in a way that is offensive? That's one that comes up a lot in that subtype, and trying to play it out in advance. Um, and it really could come up in any subtype though.
It really, yeah, contamination, even, right? Like,
Mm,
what are all the ways that this could go wrong if I touch this at work instead of this?
right.
All of them, really.
Or yeah, like the if I touch that, then what's going to happen next? And what am I going to, it almost starts to bleed into tracing, which we talked about last week, right? Like trying to
Yep.
predict, okay, well, what are all the things I'm going to touch next? And how could that impact me? All of that good stuff.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
So
What
mental
else?
checking, which
That's you, girl. Go.
oh, mental checking, the way that we had talked about it in the context of this presentation was in maybe like a narrow scope. We talked about emotional checking last week. And maybe we can do a nod at some point to the fact that, you know, these names are somewhat arbitrary, like the different subtypes that we talk about. So it could like cover a broader range than just what we're going to discuss in theory. But when we talk about mental checking, oftentimes that involves going back into your mind and almost checking your memories of checking. So if you are prone to checking the front door, for instance, to make sure that it's locked, you might go back and check a memory of having checked the front door just to be sure that you did it.
Right, which also leads to things like false memory, real events, things like that, right? Is let me go back and check that memory and see if it's exactly how I remember it.
Ooh,
And all
so
the
good.
deets related to it.
Yeah. And that's actually funny because moral scrupulosity just came up. That can come up there too, right? Trying to review or check back on a memory and say, well, wait a second. Did I say something? Did I do something that was inappropriate or offensive against my morals?
Right.
But yeah, no, I think that you're so right on about the real event and false memory.
Sucker.
Bastards. That's a better word for it. Sucker. Uh, but then that leads nicely into the question of what memory hoarding is.
Yes, memory hoarding. Think about it in terms of hoarding items. This is just hoarding memories constantly and trying to track it all and almost have this inventory so you can go back and say, oh, is that exactly how I remember like locking the door? So like feeling that lock feeling, right? Like remembering that. Or what's another way it can come up?
Well,
So many ways. I don't remember how we talked about it in the presentation, but
I think we actually maybe talked about it in the way that you just did. What's interesting is I loved the way you were describing it because it kind of made me think like it's like you're looking through a catalog of things. Like you save them all up and you're like, all right, well, let's go to Wednesday, October 3rd. I don't know if that was a Wednesday, by the
like the
way, or
Rolodex.
is exactly. Sorry.
Yeah.
First of all, you can't see my fingers, but doing the Rolodex motion. But yes, so you're going through and you're like, well, let's pull this one out and inspect it, right? Like, oh, okay. Well, I'm not sure about that one. That seems like it doesn't indicate that I'm good. So I should probably go back over and this is where they all dovetail into one another, right? You go through your memories and you're like, you find something and then it's mental review time because you want to go back and you want to make
Light it up.
sure. That's right. That's right.
Light it up.
OCD is all about lighting things up.
Oh my gosh, is it ever?
Yep.
And remember, last thing really quickly is that last week Lauren had mentioned this, and I think it might be good for those of you who maybe are just joining us for the first part of mental compulsions, because we talked about it last week. This is part 2, that these are all like really loose ways of talking about this. Like these titles aren't official titles. Everyone talks about, all OCD therapists might talk about these things. They might not be using the exact language, so don't get too caught up in the actual language, but it's more about these are ideas of what mental compulsive behavior looks like. And this is our cue to recognize it's compulsive so we can then intervene. But
yes,
they
well
all
said.
just like content, right? Like, oh, this is harm OCD. Oh, this is pedophilia OCD. It's all just bleeding. It's a mess.
Yep.
Don't get stuck in the details.
Trying to label it
Hmm.
because it's irrelevant. It's just
Yeah.
we're trying to point out ways in which the brain can be sneaky so that it doesn't fool you. Like, haha, I see you. Heard about that. Kelly and Lauren were talking about that. I don't know what it's called, but it doesn't matter. I'm still trying to get a certainty by
Yeah,
some
yeah,
sort of mental process,
yeah.
which is why I really love talking about rumination, because it is in many ways this big catch-all that so you don't necessarily need to get into the nitty-gritty, just recognizing, oh, I'm churning over and over and over this. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter if I'm churning over and over and over about the future with mental rehearsal or the past with mental review or churning over memories. It's all,
Yeah, that's the catch-all is rumination, right? Anything done in your brain that you're
yes.
chewing on, whether it's future or past.
Yes. Rumination. Good times, except for not. Um,
That's right.
so, which leads us to compulsive prayer.
Yeah. Are you up or am I up?
I don't know.
You're up. You're up.
Who's on first? I think I'd actually like to unpack this a little bit because I can see for a lot of people, prayer is obviously something that's really important to them, and so we don't want to be black and white about this.
Mm-mm.
It's a form of prayer that's really excessive and a quality that I think a lot of people can relate to when we talk about compulsive prayer versus prayer that's based on your values and what you want, is that it tends to be very hollow. It's not done with the intent of connecting to whatever God or the universe or what have you. It's done to keep things okay and safe or to drive away the discomfort that's associated with not knowing.
Right.
So I think it comes up a lot in magical thinking,
Yeah.
OCD. So if somebody has worry thoughts like I just did this. I don't know. I just stepped through the doorway and a siren started blaring outside. And so now I have to say three Hail Marys and I have to say them perfectly. And I have to be perfect with my meaning and intention behind every word so that my mother doesn't die.
Yeah. Yep. So it's done to eliminate the anxiety, right? It's
Yep.
done with urgency and there's this intensity behind it. Like the content's a little hollow, but the feeling is like, if I don't, something bad will happen. And
That's such a good point. It's simultaneously
hollow
lacks
yet,
meaning, but it's also like
yeah,
it's
doom.
focused.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not
Right.
focused on the thing that I think most people want prayer to be focused on.
Totally. And the rigidity of it, the fact that like how you
Mm-hmm.
had said is like I have to do it, I have to say it perfectly, and I
Mm-hmm.
have to say it with perfect intention. It's like, well, would the average person who's praying think like that? Likely not, right? Like they're going to be okay with, you missing a couple words or being distracted when you're doing your prayer or not having it be exactly at 9 p.m., right?
Yep.
There's definitely more room.
Yes.
So,
That's
yeah.
so true. And I think I love what you said about that because it's like that inflexibility with things is so characteristic of all compulsions, including this one.
Mm-hmm.
And it also it reminds me of compulsions related to rereading when it's
Yep.
like I'm not sure that I'm getting the right information out of this. Like I'm not sure that I'm focused correctly on this. And what if I missed something? I need to reread it. That
Mm.
as you try to focus in on every individual word more and more, the more you lose the plot of the whole
Yeah.
meaning and the more that you need to reread. So it has that kind of flavor to it.
Yeah, you're effed, basically.
Yeah, don't.
Abort
It's a
mission.
trap. It's a trap.
It's
Abort.
all a trap.
Yep. What about scenario twisting?
Ah, good old scenario twisting. Well,
There
this
he is
is,
again.
yeah, and it kind of bleeds into, again, that mental rehearsal, right? Is like, let me find ways that I can twist potential outcomes. And it could be from the past too, right? It's like, if last week when I went on this date, if Jim or Jimmy, I always use that name. I've yet to meet
Poor
one.
Jim.
Poor Jimmy. I don't even know Jimmy, but poor buddy.
He's
So
having a hard time.
yeah, he just gets nailed constantly by me in my examples. So, Jimmy, what if I had said this to him instead? How would the outcome have been? Or in the future, how when I um, drive this direction or I choose Exxon instead of Chevron, which they're all a nightmare, just pick one.
Good
Um,
point.
Same
There's
with
no winning
Jimmy
at the gas pump for sure.
or with Jimmy.
Nope. No.
So, yeah, anything to add to that, puppy?
No, I think you crushed it.
Okay.
And let's round it out with some self-reassurance talk. Yeah.
Mm,
This I think this one comes up so much. Just
mhm.
wanting to go over the information in a way to make yourself feel better about the unknown. Like,
Yeah.
oh, but that's not going to happen because this, that, or the other thing, and whatever story you make up in your mind. Um, so, for example, if you're worried that if you have POCD and you're worried about what you could do to a child, that you might say, well, but I'm a really good aunt and I'm really caring and I've never harmed my niece, so I wouldn't never harm anyone else. Right? Like
Right.
that's an example of reassuring yourself, which and I'd love to hear both your thoughts on self-reassurance as a whole, but also um, the the element of it makes sense to go over the rationality once, as
Yeah.
we talk about all the time. And I think in that initial reality check isn't the same as self reassurance. It's about going, okay, well, what makes sense here? But beyond that, if we continue to go back over and over that information, it becomes a real problem.
Yeah. It's anything that's in excess to what the average person would be doing. So if we're starting with cognitive restructuring and we're saying, well, this is likely an OCD thought, and this is why, it's like it fits all the components. It feels urgent that you're engaging in this compulsive behavior, yada, yada, yada,
Mm.
right? Is like, that's great. We want to reframe it and like call it for what it is. But at the same time, we also have to accept that, oh, well, maybe it isn't OCD though, right? Like it's possible it isn't. Because saying it's just, this is just OCD is a really common self reassurance. Is like
Mm-hmm.
these thoughts aren't important. Like this is really that's good. But like you said, in small tidbits, it's good. It's when it becomes really just over the top and it's done to try to neutralize it and have total certainty that this must be true or false.
Yeah. Gosh, that example is so important. The reassuring yourself that it's OCD because it
Yeah.
happens so much for people. You must watch it happen. So
Mm-hmm.
people learn in the community, oh, well, my thoughts don't necessarily mean anything. And, they're quote unquote OCD thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just ignore them and it's safe. And then it's like, but what if it's not safe? Right. And
Right.
that's the problem is that if we say it's safe, we have to
The
still
maybe.
accept uncertainty. Yep, we still have to leave in there the potential
Yeah.
that it's not safe, that it's yeah. And the idea of an OCD thought from that standpoint, it's almost like a false dichotomy. It's to say that there's OCD thoughts and then there are normal thoughts, and
Right,
the
right, right.
reality is like
Thoughts are thoughts.
thoughts are thoughts, man.
Yeah. Memories are thoughts.
Yeah, they are. They're all private experiences.
Oh, I love private experiences. So, shall we answer some questions, or do you want to add anything else to that?
The only thing I was going to suggest is, well, do we have a bunch of questions? Because
I
maybe we could
haven't looked
split.
through.
Well, why don't you look? Because I was going to suggest that we maybe touch on a way to support people with mental compulsions. Um, but we can always do next week. Oh, well, not next week. Next week, actually, we have a special guest joining us.
Ah,
Jen,
yes.
Jenna Overbaugh will be here, of Jenna Overbaugh. You know, Jenna Overbaugh of Jenna Overbaugh.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
she works with No CD, and she also has an Instagram presence. So she'll be joining us. We'll be talking with her, but maybe the week after we could talk about how we work with mental compulsions. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of questions.
Well, then let's just dive into questions. Take a couple.
Okay. So this one I like because I think um, it kind of, let me read it to you. So mental review always leading to catastrophe for me. My mind goes to the worst outcome.
Mm.
Um, some people actually use that word, like catastrophic mental review or something. I've heard of it like that.
Hmm.
Well, it's like, I think that's kind of the example of how all this works. It ends up in like catastrophe, right? And
Generally.
it generally, mental review doesn't end in a positive, right?
Mm-mm.
Unless you're doing that whole thought replacement where you're replacing the bad with the good, but that ends up backfiring anyways.
Yeah, because then you're gonna get another bad thought, and it's a whole thing. Thought
Right.
suppression. But yeah, that's a good
It's like
point.
you're prepping yourself for the worst.
For sure. And it is sort of a safety mechanism, right? If I can make sure that first of all, I have all of the information in place so that if the worst case scenario comes, like I'm all prepared for it and ready to respond, but also so I won't be too disappointed, right? Like I can somehow safeguard myself from future negative feelings, I think is part of the play there.
Right.
But
Yeah.
but it never ends in daffodils and bunnies. Unless
No.
the bunnies are dead and the daffodils are covered with blood.
Yeah. Hello. Good morning, Monday. Okay, I have
Yeah.
another one. Um,
Okay.
this person says, how do you know if it's mental compulsion or just a fact? So I would suggest going to watch our first part one on mental compulsions, because what we talked about in that one is pulling apart the obsession versus the compulsion. But there's no compulsive behavior is just you. It's not about fact. It's about you attempting to get to some fact that hasn't yet occurred,
Yeah.
right? Or something that already did happen and we're trying to like negate it or figure it out in some way. And that's also impossible. So
No, that's a good point. I think you're right. The fear is that the obsession is a fact usually.
correct.
And all of that to say too, it's important to remember that thoughts are like words in a book. The book can be fiction or nonfiction, but they're still just words.
Right.
So that's the same thing with thoughts, right? Like it could be factual, but it could not be, and all of it's just a story ultimately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it is. It's all this tale.
The tale of the daffodils and the bunnies
Yeah, and all we
story.
have is the present moment. It is a gift. It's why it's called the present.
That's right. So no matter what the story, and yeah, okay. Oh, can I talk about helpful, unhelpful? That might be an
Mm-hmm.
important thing to touch on too, is that
Yep.
even if it is factual, in the happiness trap by Russ Harris, he talks about the example of a woman who is single in her 30s and she's really disappointed. It's her birthday. She wants to be with somebody. but she keeps sort of churning about the fact that she's single. And the idea is like, okay, there is a fact. She is single. And she also would prefer not to be. That's her preference. But that fact is not, it's not helpful to spend a lot of time reviewing that fact, because one way or another, if she wants to find somebody, reviewing the fact that she's single and like creating the horrible narrative of how she's going to be single and alone forever in her head is definitely not going to help in the quest to not be single.
No, it doesn't like
So
make Jimmy happen.
it doesn't make Jimmy appear, sweet Jimmy. Jimmy can be the knight in shining armor at the end of the anxiety tunnel. But yes, and obviously the example that I gave is much more of like sort of generalized anxiety, but as we've
It's all the
talked about,
same.
it's all the same.
It's all the same. It's not
Cousins.
problem solving.
Nope.
Which, yeah, I think next time maybe we do a part 3, because I think we're going to need more time to give concrete tools.
I agree. But I think I'm glad that you said problem solving, because ultimately this is all problem solving gone awry. That's what mental compulsions and compulsions as a general rule are.
Right.
So,
And that leads to this question,
maybe our last question of the day.
Yeah. When I have a sensation, I automatically try to figure out if I have cancer. So this is exactly what we're talking about, right? Is like, this is not helpful. You thinking about it or you trying to figure it out isn't making you have cancer or not have cancer. You either have it or you don't. And that's a scary reality to live with, but it's the only reality.
Yep.
It's the only reality we have. So, and I picked this one on purpose because it's content that, may or may not be like really, it might border on generalized anxiety and health anxiety or OCD. It kind of hits all of them, which is like, oh, you have permission now to ruminate on this, because most people would ruminate on a thought like that if they were given some set of symptoms or a doctor alluded to something or they had a bodily sensation. But the reality is, yep.
Of course, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Like of course you would, and anyone would. And sorry, go back. You continue.
Right. Well, and we're not going to figure it out in our mind. We have to let a doctor figure that out.
I've tried to figure out a lot in my mind about things that can't be figured out in there. It doesn't work out very well. I can speak from personal experience.
Yeah, it doesn't. Nope, it does not do that.
No, it turns out I can't diagnose myself in my brain. It's weird. It doesn't have the answer.
I tried to do that for 9 months while I was pregnant, and I ended up in ICU for a week. So not thinking about that obsession, though, not thinking about what was really going on.
Isn't that crazy? That's the funny thing, is that we think that we are so capable of figuring all this stuff out when there are way too many factors. There are way too many factors. Okay. Have you heard about this new movie, the Everything Everywhere All at Once?
No, I don't hear about any new things.
Okay.
Please tell me.
Let me tell you about the new thing.
Okay.
So I went to see it, and it was great. And the movie is about basically a woman in the multiverse. And yes, and there's this like sort of interdimensional play of things, but you see all of these different universes. And one of the universes, they have hot dogs instead of fingers. So their fingers are like hot dogs. And obviously it's very funny to watch this, but I think the point that like you can't imagine all of the ways that that things could play out, right? Like it's not, I've thought about so much stupid stuff over the years.
Yeah.
Never once had I thought, what if my fingers were hot dogs? Never until I saw this movie. So
yeah.
If you think that you can figure out everything,
you can't.
You're wrong. Yeah.
And even if you have like this slight idea of like, well, this person usually responds this way if I say that, it's still we've already gone too far.
Yeah.
We've already gone too far. We just have to be present. And that's very scary. We just have to be super aggressive. Here we are,
Or
present moment, present moment. Now, if you're like going and you have to move, it's like, okay, well, I roughly know the things that have to get done. These are the steps I'm going to take to get them done. That's problem solving.
yeah.
That's not mental compulsive behavior, but it can tip. It can still tip.
Oh, it can. It can.
So, yeah.
It's all in the, as you were saying earlier, it's like the rigidity, the excessiveness, the quality of it,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and the effectiveness of it. If it's not doing anything, if you're not getting any more marrow out of going over it for the 15th time, you might want to consider doing something else instead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Again,
Okay.
speaking from personal experience as well as professional. Like I'm not casting aspersions here. I get it. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's really hard when you're in it, and the pull to do it is
Yeah, it's intense. It's
it is.
intense.
So stay strong out there, warriors.
Stay strong. Fight the good fight.
That's right.
So next week we're gonna have Jenna on,
Yep.
and the following week, part 3, mental compulsions.
Watch out, world. We're going to start talking about how to deal with those suckers.
Yeah. Good to
In the
see you, friend.
meantime, always good to see you, and I hope everybody has a lovely week.
Yes. Have a good
Take
week.
care. Bye.
Bye.